जननीं शारदां देवीं रामकृष्णं जगद्गुरुं पादपद्मे तयो श्रित्वा प्रणमामि मुहुर्मुहुः. I welcome all of you to this new series of talks which we are beginning on a very auspicious day. It is the birthday according to Janmatithi, according to the Hindu calendar, of Srimad Swami Vijnanand Ji Maharaj, who was a direct disciple and also who was the fourth president of the Ramakrishna order. So he was full of Sri Ramakrishna. I mean, he was in his whole life, if you see Swami Vijnanandaji's life, he hardly had any communication with anybody except his books and informal conversations. One hardly saw Swami Vijnanandaji giving talks, lectures, and addressing public meetings. He lived a very quiet life. When he was most of the time he was in Allahabad, and even as the president, he used to come from Allahabad and attend all the meetings and rarely stay at Belur Math. But at the same time, he was very active in the sense he translated a lot of books and wrote some nice books, including the first Life in Hindi of Sri Ramakrishna. So that book became very popular, and it was one of the first biographies of Sri Ramakrishna in Hindi, because he was in Allahabad and he knew some publishers there. And then he translated the famous Narada Pancharatra, which is a very important book, which is known as one of the authoritative texts of Vaishnava Tantra. Tantra is a sadhana based on worshipping God as the Divine Mother. And Sri Ramakrishna, under the guidance of Bhairavi Brahmani, practiced all the tantric disciplines according to the 64 tantras. And that there are Shakta tantras where mother is worshipped, but there are Vaishnava tantras also where the feminine aspect of mother is worshipped by the Vaishnavas. So Narada Pancharatra is a famous text, and that book has an elaborate discussion on all the bija mantras which are attached to most of the mantras which are given to initiated as aspirants who are initiated in the Ramakrishna order. So he wrote a nice English commentary, or maybe you can say a translation, a free translation. It was a very rare book, Narada Pancharatra. And then there is another book, Devi Bhagavatam. It is like any other book, but it is a very authoritative text on the Shakti mode of worship or the Shakti sect. And this Devi Bhagavata is a very big book, and it was published from Banaras, from Allahabad, where Swami Vijnanandaji lived. So much for Swami Vijnanandaji, but his life, he was dedicated to Sri Ramakrishna, and he knew nothing other than Sri Ramakrishna in his life. He was immersed in the thought of Sri Ramakrishna. He meditated on Sri Ramakrishna in various aspects. So that is why we have decided to start this particular series of talks, especially for those devotees who have been initiated, who have taken a formal initiation. Of course, others will also benefit, or those who are likely, or those who are interested to explore the possibility of getting initiated into the Ramakrishna order, for them also this will be very useful, because the whole ideology or the whole philosophy behind the Mantra Diksha centers around Sri Ramakrishna and his wonderful life. Unless we understand his wonderful life and message in depth, superficially everybody knows about Sri Ramakrishna. And there are many books, very short lives of Sri Ramakrishna. Christopher Isherwood has also written a book, Ramakrishna and his disciples. There are other books written by Roma Rolla and Max Muller. Also, there's a small book. And there are so many other books, both in several languages. But this book, Sri Ramakrishna, the Great Master, which is the English translation of a 5-volume monumental biography of Sri Ramakrishna by Swami Shardananda, who was a monastic disciple of Sri Ramakrishna. This is supposed to be the most authentic, factual, not only descriptive, but a wonderful interpretative and comprehensive biography of Sri Ramakrishna, whom Christopher Isherwood described as a spiritual phenomena. When he began writing his biography of Sri Ramakrishna, he did not consider him to be a personality. He said, this is a story of a phenomena. So he is it's this biography describes the phenomena which appeared in this world as Sri Ramakrishna. So if we try to, the more we try to understand Sri Ramakrishna, we will find the glorious diversity of not only religious, but all the different views which humankind has lived in its vast history, especially Sri Ram, as Swami Vivekananda describes it. He lived the spiritual life of 3,000 years of all the sects and all the great spiritual personages who incarnated in India. So he was a condensed manifestation of all those sects that preceded him. So we have to remember that. And this biography was written by Swami Shardanandji because he felt, not that this was the first biography, before him several people had attempted, including Ramchandra Datta, who was a householder disciple of Sri Ramakrishna. But when these books were published, when Swami Shardananda came across these books, he found that there were several inaccuracies. And he felt that unless a authentic biography is written, it will do more harm rather than good. In the ultimate, when you see this, most of the messages of these great prophets and incarnations, including those of Buddha, Christ, and all the other prophets that preceded him, most of these biographies were written much after the passing away of these prophets. And then as time passed, there was so much of dilution, both in the life as well as the message, and it got diluted. So Buddha's teachings were compiled 500 years after his birth. So 500 years is a very pretty long time, and so many things change. The interpretation and the disciples, when the message is conveyed to successive chain of disciples, there is a likelihood of the message getting either diluted, or maybe there is a wrong understanding which leads to some inaccuracies in describing the life and message of that prophet. Now, if we see Sri Ramakrishna's life, we all know he was born on 18th February 1836. That was his birthday. And He passed away on 16th August 1886. So roughly a little more than 49 years, a little less than 50 years. So we can see that his divine life can be divided into three major parts. First, you can say his early life, his youth, his childhood and youth, which from 1836 to 1952, 1852, 1836 to 1852, practically for 16 years, he lived in Kamarpukur, in the rural atmosphere of his native village, which was Kamarpukur. The second part of his life is the time he spent, his adult life, from 1852 to 1885 in Calcutta and nearby Dakshineshwar. First, he came to Calcutta because his brother was working there. He stayed with his brother for a couple of years, and then moved to the temple garden of Dakshineshwar, where he lived for the next 30 years. So out of 32 years, 2 or 3 years he lived in Calcutta. And then it was this period of his life which was which is very important for us. No doubt his childhood and his younger days are equally important, but his adult life from 1852 to 1885, where when he moved to the temple garden of Dakshineshwar and he lived for nearly 30 years, he practiced various sadhanas according to different sects, attained illumination, and began to preach his divine message to all the disciples who slowly gathered around him, just as bees, when the flower is, as he used to say, when the flower has fully bloomed, the bees come of themselves. So the bees started coming, and the result or the fruit of his intense sadhana, which he did from 1852 onwards till 1885, when he moved to the last year of his life, you can say, when he moved to Kashipur, where he spent, where he concluded his divine play or the divine drama, Leela Prasanga. Leela means divine play. He concluded that because all incarnations in India, their actions or their whole life is described as a Leela. They are not born as any other ordinary human being or jiva is born because of the past karma. They are born with a particular purpose, with a particular intention, or with a particular purpose which they have to fulfill during the course of their life, through their life, as well as the message that they deliver, and which continues or which is carried down through a succession of disciples whom they train and whom they inspire and whom they initiate. So the divine drama from September 1885, when he moved to Kolkata back again from Dakshineshwar, he was brought to Calcutta, first to Shambazar, and then he came to Kashipur Garden House, where he concluded, you can say, his divine drama, and also sowed the seeds of the future Ramakrishna order. And the tradition continues to this day. And all the wonderful incidents that took place right from his birth and early life in Kamarpukur to his adult life from 1852 to 1852 to 1885, for nearly 32 years in Calcutta and Dakshineshwar, which is also a part of Calcutta. And then the last year, very important last year of his life, say from September 1885 to August 1886, when he concluded his divine drama. But that period was very important because that was the consolidation and the filtering of the different disciples and devotees who were to carry forward his message. He consolidated, he knew his divine drama is going to come to an end. and he was planning his departure by handing over the responsibilities, various responsibilities of carrying forward the wonderful message which he came to deliver. And also indirectly formed, it formed, the Kashipur formed the nucleus of the future Ramakrishna order, you can say, because he gave those Gerua cloth to all informally. Of course, he did not give sannyas, but he handed over those Gerua clothes, the robes of monks, to those youths whom he had chosen to carry on his wonderful mission. So, Swami Shardanandji, now, when we come to the text of this book, Sri Ramakrishna, the Great Master, which is nothing but a translation of the 5-volume monumental work Sri Ramakrishna Leela Prasanga. Of course, there's a new translation which is also available now, Sri Ramakrishna and his Divine Play. I think this title is more appropriate because Leela Prasanga means the divine play, Sri Ramakrishna and his divine play. But for obvious reasons, the divine play, the concept of the divine play, the working out of the life and message of an incarnation as a play, that concept was not very popular, especially among the Western and European, the Western tradition of even the religious traditions of the West would not have understood what this divine play meant. The idea of the divine play or the Leela Prasanga. Prasanga means incidents, Leela means the divine play. So the book was named by Swami Jagadananda, who was a disciple of Holy Mother and who was requested to translate this Leela Prasanga. Swami Shardanandji himself wanted to translate the 5 volumes, but unfortunately he did not have the time. In fact, the 5th volume also he could not complete because the passing away of the Holy Mother, after that he did not feel that he should conclude his 5th volume. That is why there's a small abrupt end to the 5th volume. But anyway, so far as the translation is concerned, it was left to Swami Jagadananda, who was a disciple of Holy Mother. He was a very senior monk of the Ramakrishna order, a great scholar. He had a firm grounding in the Shastras, and also he was the author of several translations into Bengali and other languages of certain scriptures. And he was requested to do this monumental work, and that's how we get the Great Master. So those who want a PDF copy of that book, you can just message me on WhatsApp. I have already sent to several people who had requested for a copy, so that you can just go through that book. Of course, I will not be strictly reading out from that book, but we'll cover all the main chapters or the main points or the main the whole description of what Swami Shardanandji has written about his Great Master. We will try to cover almost every word or every line from this book. Now, before we start the text or the introduction with Swami Shardanandji, the preface which he himself wrote, you have to remember that Swami Shardanandji did not follow a chronological sequence when he wrote these 5 volumes. He himself explained why he did not follow a chronological sequence. Because when he worked on that, you will find that he first wrote the 3rd volume, which was later on published as the 3rd volume, but he started writing. In fact, he wrote a series of articles which formed the 3rd volume of the 5-volume Sri Ramakrishna Leela Prasanga. Now, why did he do that? Why did he not start with the birth and the adult life, or maybe the youth of Sri Ramakrishna, the youthful days of Sri Ramakrishna, which is part 1. Then we have part 2. Then we have part 3, which is Guru Bhav Purvardha. In Bengali, Purvardha means the first part of the Guru Bhav, the mood of the Guru. So why did he start with that? And then you will find Guru Bhav Uttarardha, that is part 2 of the Guru Bhav. So the third and fourth volume, you can see, first he wrote third and fourth volumes, then he completed 2 second volume, then 1, and then finally he wrote the 5th volume. So the sequence is volume number 3, the book as it is published now in 5 volumes in original Bengali. Of course, all these books have been combined together. The first 3, part 1, part 2, part 3, they form the first volume of the Great Master. The Great Master, the volume which is available in the book which is available in 2 volumes, but there is a bigger book which is all the 5 parts combined. It's a very big volume. So for convenience, it has been divided into 2 parts, Great Master Part 1, Great Master Part 2. And Part 1 comprises of volume 1, 2 and 3, and 4 and 5 are from the part 2 of that 2 volume Great Master. So now the reason why he did not follow a chronological sequence, we will try to understand why he did it in his own words. He said, unless people understand how the master remained in Bhavamukha. Bhavamukha is a state which is possible only for incarnations. One has to understand this concept of Bhavamukha, which is very difficult. Was for the first time, Swami Sharadananji explained this concept in a very scientific and logical way. It is an exalted state between the absolute and the relative world. It is very difficult. You can't stay in both these worlds. It is like there are 2 rooms and there is a door in between. And if one has the freedom to go to either of these 2 rooms, go to the other room and come back, that is the state which enables a divine personality or an incarnation to remain in an exalted state, to remain immersed in the absolute, and at his own will, sweet will, he can come to the relative world without with the full influence of the absolute, of having realized the absolute. At the same time, they can live and perform their leela or the divine play in the relative world. Relative in the sense a temporary world, the world as we see it. And without understanding what this Bhavamukha state is, it was very difficult, according to Swami Sharadananji, to understand what is the significance of Sri Ramakrishna's life. Is he like an ordinary saint, or is he, because he did not, in those days at least, Sri Ramakrishna or even Swami Vivekananda insisted on not like Ramchandra Datta and others try to preach that he was an incarnation. It was like they were literally trying to force it down, force people to accept this fact. Whereas Swamiji differed. He said, let people accept Sri Ramakrishna the way they want to, either as a saint or as a prophet or as an avatara or in any other form, as long as they accept or as long as they're inspired by his principles. Principles are more important. Of course, the life is important, but one does not have to accept him as an incarnation. So here, Swami Sharadananji is also following that same approach. Whereas others like Girish Ghosh and Ramchandra Datta and other householder disciples, they insisted right from the beginning that we are describing a story of an incarnation, an avatar of God. And many people, especially those who were scientific in their approach, they found it a little difficult to swallow this concept. So Swamiji knew it because he had been, he had passed through a struggle himself to accept him because of his Western education and because of his influence of the Brahmo Samaj on him, especially during his younger days. When he came to Sri Ramakrishna, he found it so difficult to accept that God can incarnate as a human being. And it was only towards the end of his life, he says, he tells Sister Nivedita that how much I fought with my master. For 6 years, I had to struggle to really know who he is. And it took 6 long years. That is the period when he first came in contact with Sri Ramakrishna, and then finally Sri Ramakrishna declared, when the thought came to him that is it possible that a divine, uh, the Lord himself can incarnate in this way and undergo all these kinds of suffering. So had that thought had just come to his mind, when suddenly he found Sri Ramakrishna, and as if he had read his mind, he immediately said, even now you are having doubts. Even now you are, after so much of experience that has been given to you, so many experiences by Sri Ramakrishna's gave Swami Vivekananda had, and so he was a witness to all these experiences. So even after these experiences, he says, even now you are doubting me. He who was Rama and he who was Krishna has come now as Sri Ramakrishna, but not in your Vedantic sense. When he said that, when the Vedantic sense is that all are manifestations of the divine. So all animals, all creatures, even the plants and inanimate objects are Brahman. So in that way, everybody is an incarnation of God. But he says not in your Vedantic sense. So there was a deeper thing he wanted to convey. And Swami Vivekananda, of course, accepted it, but he did not insist on this approach being followed. And he had told Swami Shardanandji, because I think he knew that uh, after his passing away, Swami Shardanandji would be writing his biography, because he was the one who was asked to compile the important incidents of his life and message and hand it over to Max Muller. When Swami Vivekananda came to England, it was Max Muller was so much impressed, and he wanted to write something about Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna is Life and Teachings, which Max Muller published, the first English publication of uh, a biography of Sri Ramakrishna with the sayings. That material was collected and sent to Max Muller by Swami Shardanandji. So indirectly, we can see that Swami Vivekananda had indirectly prepared Swami Shardanandji to write this monumental biography. Of course, the life and message and the teachings which Max Muller has published with very little editing. He practically he took the material and just published it as it is. That was actually prepared and sent to Max Muller by Swami Shardanandji. So, so here he was told, even when he sent those materials, Swamiji perhaps would have told him to avoid mentioning that or avoid forcing the people to accept that he is an incarnation. If people want to accept him as an incarnation, which one will come to a conclusion after reading this great master. That is why the study of this book, The Great Master, is very, very important, especially for those who have accepted Sri Ramakrishna as their ideal, as the ideal for their life. When you take the mantra, or when you are initiated into the mantra given, which comes down through a tradition of gurus, when the mantra of Sri Ramakrishna is accepted, we just don't meditate on his form. Of course, you have to meditate on his form, the picture which is very popular, which we worship, because that is a very exalted state of bhava, as Sri Ramakrishna himself said, and he said this picture will be worshipped in every house. So that was the prophecy he had made. But apart from meditating on the image or the picture of Sri Ramakrishna, we have to meditate on his Leela also. That is why a study of the great master, which describes all the aspects, especially for a modern mind, which is which wants a scientific or a logical explanation of all the events, whether they, even if they are spiritual and they transcend the ordinary levels of, I mean, the interpretation which a ordinary human mind can make. No doubt these truths are transcendental and based on experience, but even then they will never contradict reason. So a very scientific and rational approach has been followed by Swami Shardanandji. That's why in the beginning itself he says that unless people understand what this Bhavamukha state is and how the mood of a guru was natural to him, not that he hated if somebody called him a guru. He was so humble. He was just a child of the Divine Mother, his Divine Mother whom he worshipped. He never, but the idea that he was a guru never came to him. But at the same time, the mood of the guru was very natural to him. To show that, Swami Shardanandji says he wrote the third and fourth volume first, which describes, which are in Bengali, they have been named as Guru Bhav Purvardha, means the first part of the Guru, his life as the Guru, and Guru Bhav Uttarardha, the second part, when other disciples started coming, when the younger disciples started coming. So these are the two volumes which he, 3 and 4, which he wrote first. So, and he believed that unless Sri Ramakrishna is accepted as a guru, especially because he was in a Bhavamukha state, he could remain in a Bhavamukha state and bring the treasures of the transcendental, the absolute, to the relative world and explain to even a child. That is what we do in the gospel. When we discuss the gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, we find so many wonderful gems of truth, gems of experience which Sri Ramakrishna experienced throughout his life. He has conveyed through the medium of the gospel. So this great master, the study of the great master, is an excellent or a wonderful companion to the gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. That's why I thought let us discuss, because every Sunday we are discussing the gospel, but unless it is understood in the light of the life of Sri Ramakrishna, his message, it is easier to understand the message of Sri Ramakrishna because his life was his message. So unless we understand the life in great depth, we will not be able to understand properly the message as we get it from the gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. So to comprehend the master's wonderful character, that is what Swami Shardanji says, they will not be able to comprehend, they means the readers will not be able to comprehend the wonderful character, the unprecedented mental state, and all these things they cannot comprehend unless they understood what this Guru Bhav or what this Bhavamukha state is, which was natural to him. So, lest they misunderstand and consider his actions just as those actions of a great saint or a human being, that would be a great mistake. So, one has to understand in depth what the different incidents, what the different leelas mean. But if you see in the great master, in beginning of the great master, Sri Ramakrishna is trying, Swami Shardanji is trying to bring out, in the introduction itself, he says that the very reason why this volume 3 starts with Bhavamukha, and he begins with something very strange. Swami Vivekananda, who refused to write a biography of Sri Ramakrishna, wrote a small booklet on one of the birthdays of Sri Ramakrishna, which they used to celebrate before even they used to celebrate it in Dakshineshwar. That is, I think, I don't remember the exact year, but on that occasion, Swami Vivekananda wrote a small book, Hindu Dharma o Sri Ramakrishna, Hinduism and Sri Ramakrishna. So that booklet has been published verbatim in the introduction to the third volume, in the beginning of the third volume, which he wrote first. And there he says, this is the article which I have taken as the basis of my entire biography. So it's worthwhile to even read that, but of course we'll come to it when we read the third part of the volume. We'll go according to the sequence, the great master, the sequence of the great master. But he was keen, he published these articles. He did not follow a chronological sequence only because of this reason, because he felt that people will not be able to comprehend the wonderful character of the master, and they will just think he's a great saint. But if they know what Bhav Mukha is, if they knew that the Guru Bhav, which has been described elaborately, his interactions with his disciples, both householders and monastic, in volume 3 and 4, unless one comprehends that Guru Bhav, they will not understand the importance and significance of his wonderful character. So that is why we will see that as we go on discussing these wonderful concepts. Of course, this concept of Bhav Mukha will come much later when we come to the third volume. So it's not possible to discuss it now, but we will just, I just give you this background to understand why we have to, why the explanation which he gave, why the third volume was written first. So that is as far as the third volume. Yeah. So now we'll come to another aspect of this divine play, that, as I told you, this wonderful book which Swami Vivekananda, a small booklet which Swami Vivekananda wrote, which is known as Hinduism and Sri Ramakrishna, he described 3 important points why Sri Ramakrishna incarnated. Now this forms the basis, according to Swami Sharadananda, this forms the basis of this Sri Ramakrishna, the great master. And that has been published in the introduction to the third volume of the book, which comes almost in the middle of the whole great master. Now in this, there are 3 salient points which we have to very clearly remember, which Swami Vivekananda, he begins his Hinduism and Sri Ramakrishna by saying that Sri Ramakrishna's life, the first thing he said, Sri Ramakrishna incarnated himself and came as an unlettered person. He discarded all forms of formal learning. Now this is also very significant. This is very significant because according to Swamiji, the very reason why he decided to discard any formal education or formal learning was that he wanted to show that spiritual experience has nothing to do with intellectual or formal learning or secular learning. So for people who think that an intellectual appreciation of certain concepts, certain ideas are necessary for spiritual progress or spiritual experience, to convey, to show that that is a wrong idea, Sri Ramakrishna was born. And he deliberately, in this incarnation, he says, Swami Vivekananda says in the beginning of his article, he says that he formally came as an unlettered person. He deliberately refused to go to school. He discarded all formal learning to show that religious experience can be spontaneously revealed in the mind of a sincere sadhaka, a spiritual aspirant, with or without. He may be learned, he may not be learned, but that has nothing to do, learned in the secular sense, of course. He might have gone to the university or he might not have gone to the university, might not have even gone to school, but that doesn't deter a person from having spiritual experience. So what are the conditions and how in his life Sri Ramakrishna has demonstrated, Swamiji says, he demonstrated that in the Vedas, just as the Vedas were revelations of the rishis who realized these, who got these spiritual experiences in the depths of their hearts by leading by doing a lot of spiritual practice which leads to the purity of the mind. So in a pure mind, these great spiritual truths about Brahman, about the absolute, about the transcendental reality, about God, about divinity, and all the aspects of religion or true spirituality are revealed spontaneously in the minds of those rishis who have purified their minds. The only condition is, as I have described many times, what does purification of mind really mean? What does purification of mind is taking the mind from a grosser level to more and more subtle levels of existence. So we start with the Annamaya Kosha, then we go to the Pranamaya Kosha. It's not that we disconnect ourselves from the Annamaya and Pranamaya Kosha, but we focus more on the higher levels of our personality, the finer levels of their personality. Before you can transcend, it is just like climbing a multi-storied, a five-storied building. You can't just jump on the terrace. You have to pass through the staircase, pass through the lower levels of existence, and then come to the intellectual level, which is the third level, the Manomaya Kosha. Then we go to the Vijnanamaya Kosha, or the fourth level, where subtle intuitive truths, they flash in one's mind. That is what Bhavamukha means. Bhavamukha means the intuitive truths that come from a zone which transcends the relative, and he touches the absolute. The sadhaka touches the absolute, and he has the capacity to come back to the relative world and explain those intuitive truths, not through the medium of the intellect, which is the third floor, you can say, which is a far lower level of existence. So that is the idea. So this unprecedented mental state, the high states of mind that Sri Ramakrishna exhibited, and the extraordinary activities that he did, inspired by these wonderful, the transformation he could have in the people who came to him seeking spiritual knowledge, the wonderful transformation of Girish Ghosh and all the other direct disciples, whether they were monastic or non-monastic or householders, they experienced these extraordinary truths in their own life by the grace of Sri Ramakrishna. To understand that, we have to understand what this state of Bhavamukha, and that the Guru Bhav was very natural to him. For that reason, he started with the third volume. Now, coming back to this the three different aspects which form the core of Swami Vivekananda's article or a small booklet on Swami Hinduism and Sri Ramakrishna, which Swami Shardanandji reproduces verbatim, because he pays homage to this wonderful book and says that it is only because of this small booklet that I have ventured in the past also, when he collected all the materials and sent it to Max Muller, as well as when he wrote the different chapters of the third and fourth volume. It was this book, this small booklet of Swamiji, this small article of Swamiji, Hinduism and Sri Ramakrishna, that inspired him, and that formed the basis of the entire book. It's like the Brahma Sutras are there and you write a commentary upon that. So it is something like that. The sutras, if you compile them together, it will make a very small booklet. But when we comment, when Shankaracharya and all the acharyas commented on that, those sutras, they became big volumes. There was a lot of text because a lot of explanation is necessary. Swami Vivekananda obviously did not have the time because he was in a hurry to deliver his message, start the Ramakrishna order, and he had so many things. He knew his time was short. His life was also short. So in that brief life, he did not have the patience or the time to write a detailed, comprehensive biography of Sri Ramakrishna, though he was approached by Girish Chandra Ghosh. So he very politely said that, no, do you want me to prepare an image? He compared He said, if I start making an image of Shiva, and finally, because of my lack of knowledge, the image of a monkey is created. So I don't want to take that risk, and in an incomplete way portray the wonderful life and message of Sri Ramakrishna. He said it out of humility, of course, that he was not prepared or not willing to take the responsibility of writing the wonderful life and message of Sri Ramakrishna, comprehensive life and message. So out of humility he said that, but he provided in a nutshell the ideas that Swami Shardanji later on elaborated and created this wonderful 5-volume work. And in fact, he gives credit to Swamiji, and as I said, as I told you, he produces this small booklet verbatim in the introduction to his 3rd volume, which is known as Guru Bhav Purvartha. It was, of course, in Bengali, and you will find that Sri Ramakrishna, Sri Ramakrishna's life and message has been condensed. The second point which Swamiji tries to make is that he did not he came for several reasons. One is to show to the entire world that in the purified mind of a rishi or a spiritual aspirant, the great spiritual truths are revealed spontaneously. That is one way of one way how these truths are transmitted by successive generations of rishis. They are transmitted by a successive generations of rishis in this particular way. 1 minute. Yeah. So successive generation of rishis, that has been the Indian tradition. So Swamiji is trying to make this point very, very clear, that all the knowledge that has been handed over, the knowledge of the Vedas, the Upanishads, which are the scriptures, which are the formal scriptures which Hindus follow. So the same methodology Sri Ramakrishna also followed, because he was in the line of these great rishis, these great spiritual avatars who have come down to the earth from time to time to convey the same eternal message suited to the needs of the age and the times of the age, the needs of that particular age. So he says, in the purified mind of a spiritual aspirant, whether he's a rishi or whether he's an incarnation, these great universal truths, absolute truths, reveal themselves spontaneously, and intellectual knowledge does not have to be an intermediary to result in this kind of experience. So that Bhavamukha state is not a result. Sri Ramakrishna did not have to study theology or philosophy or go to a university to. This knowledge came spontaneously to him, as it would have come to the rishis of the past. So that was one important point. So then the second point which he made was that in this incarnation, there was a need, a particular need which this incarnation had to fulfill. What was that need? That need was that because of our liberal attitude of the Hindus, through a lot of experiments were made in the field of religion, and that led to, there was so much of freedom in the religious path, in the spiritual path, that Hinduism removed all the shackles. There was no dogmatic view. Even the rishis say, you may or may not accept. I am telling you what I have experienced. It is for you. Even in Bhagavad Gita, if you see, Sri Krishna tells Arjuna, I have described you all the wonderful truths. Now, you decide what you have to do with this and accept it if you find it fit. So nobody was forced to accept any dogma or any religious truth, however great it may be. So that open attitude with which rishis approach spirituality was found in the wonderful character of Sri Ramakrishna. That is what Swami Shardanji says. And he says it based on what Swami Vivekananda had written long ago. So Swamiji says there was a virtual inferno, a big fire raging throughout India because of the mushrooming of these different sects. Even within a particular sect, there were subsects, and the people were quarreling because they did not understand the essence of what the scripture said. Everybody took the scripture, created a dogmatic approach or followed a dogmatic approach to some particular teachings of the Vedas or the Upanishads or the later scriptures, which were termed as Puranas, and there was so much of religious literature. Everybody had the freedom to preach what he wanted, so what he or she wanted. So that resulted in so many sects which were quarreling with each other. This is a historical problem which Sri Ramakrishna had to face. And on top of that, Swamiji says, a lot of foreign ideas, because of the conquest first by the Mughals, by Islamic rulers, and afterwards by the British and other foreign powers. A lot of it's not just the British, the Portuguese came, and then we had the French people also came, the Dutch also came. So they brought their own ideas, own religion. Of course, England was finally colonized India. So Swamiji says, right from beginning, Hinduism has been subject to different a quarrel between their own different sects within Hinduism, and also the sects which were introduced by foreign powers or foreign ideas which came from outside, the different religions, the Semitic religions which found a place in India. So as a result of all this confusion, there were several reform movements, and Brahmo Samaj wanted to synthesize a little bit of philosophy from Hinduism, a little bit from Christianity, a little bit from Islam. Otherwise, everybody felt that my religion, everybody was trying to prove the superiority of his own religion or his own sect within Hinduism. And that led to a lot of confusion and disillusionment, and the younger generation especially, influenced by the Western ideal of materialism, was becoming increasingly agnostic. So they were trying to discard religion altogether. So it was at this juncture, Swamiji says, and Swami Shardananji also elaborately describes this. He says it was at this juncture that Swami Vivekananda says Sri Ramakrishna incarnated, and his life was a wonderful synthesis, and he came as a shining pillar of light amidst darkness of gloom that was surrounding the religious atmosphere of India. There was darkness because of the wrong understanding, not because the eternal principles were wrong, but because people took up certain limited ideas and then misinterpreted it and started their own dogmatic following, and a sect was created. And then naturally, when such things happen, when the religion becomes diluted and different dogmatic sects are created, then the only natural consequence of this is there will be quarrel between them. And this quarrel increased to such an extent, he says there was a literal conflagration of all these quarrels and a big fire. In that fire, to douse that fire, Sri Ramakrishna came as a cooling sort of cooling waters. His message came as a that is why we say Tava Kathamritam Tapta Jivanam, in the minds and the lives which are scorched by the burning ideas of materialism and all the sectarian approach to religion. When people found that religion itself, instead of helping a person to improve the quality of his life, was causing more problems than giving a solution to his problems, his sufferings. So different religious sects quarreling with each other, the sects which were introduced by foreign powers, all that created a need for an incarnation to come to this earth, and that is the purpose why Sri Ramakrishna came. So that is the second point which Sri Ramakrishna which Swami Vivekananda says Sri Ramakrishna came to fulfill. The first was to show that in the purified mind, in the in uh, the purified mind of a sincere spiritual aspirant, full of yearning, like the Vedic rishis, this uh, transcendental knowledge about the absolute, which cannot be had by an intellectual understanding of the processes of the world or the things of the world, that knowledge is spontaneously revealed in the purified minds of the rishis. To demonstrate that in his own life, he came. And the second thing which he came for is to remove this quarrels, or show that there is no point in quarreling, because in essence all the paths lead to the same goal. So this universal message, this acceptance of unity with all the diversity around us, that was the need of the hour. So that is the second point which Swami Shardanand describes in the third and fourth volume, the Guru Bhav Purvardha and Guru Bhav Uttarardha, that after practicing in the first and second volume, that has been described, that how he practiced different sadhanas according to different sects. There was a purpose behind that also. Why Bhairavi Brahmani came and taught him different religious sadhana according to religion. He was not happy with one particular method. He just wanted to see for himself what are the different methods with which a person can realize or reach the ultimate goal of life according to different sects. There must be some truth, otherwise why will there be so many followers? So he followed each path and he said the path is not wrong, but the attitude or the narrowness which was there when one follows the path, that is causing problems, and that does not allow a person to reach the highest goal. But all paths are equally valid paths if they are followed with sincerity. If the basic ideal of spiritual life, that is purity of mind, is attained, then no matter which path you follow, ultimately you will reach the goal. So that was a great discovery which Sri Ramakrishna made, not by intellectually appreciating the different, as the Brahmo Samaj and other reform movements, they try to take up some good ideas from different scriptures and say that you follow, but it is just a hodgepodge. It is like a khichdi. We are trying to put together certain things which do not ultimately, which will not produce results. But Sri Ramakrishna followed a different approach. He said, let me follow each path independently. He followed the path of all the different paths, the 64 paths which Tantras prescribed. Bhairavi Brahmani taught him. He followed the path of Advaita. Totapuri came, and then he followed the other paths, Vaishnava paths. Different gurus came. Before that is the Sadhak Bhava, that is the second part that has been described there. But Swami Shardanandji believed that first, if we understand that he was a guru first, he was a sadhaka, no doubt, as it was part of his leela. Unless he performs sadhana, how will the other sadhakas, other jivas get an inspiration? So he had to practice those things. But more important than his sadhaka bhav or sadhaka bhava, the second volume or the first volume, of course, there are wonderful incidents in his childhood also where he demonstrated his divinity, even in the second part. But for us, for people who are following a spiritual path, considering Sri Ramakrishna as our Ishta or an ideal, for us, the Guru Bhav Purvardha with which he started and the Guru Bhav Uttarardha were important. So, to comprehend the master's wonderful character, that is one goal of this Leela Prasanga or the great master. So, he says that is why these are Swami Shardanandji's words. That is why we try to make the reader understand this subject at the very outset. But for later on, of course, he decided to follow a chronological sequence because that makes sense. But in the beginning, when he started writing this, he published this Guru Bhav Purvardha and Uttarardha, the two volumes first. So then he published serially some parts of the Leela Prasang in the magazine Udbodhan, which he began in 1909. That means at least 8 years after the passing away of Swamiji. Though he had read it, internalized what Swamiji wrote in his small book, but he started writing only in 1909 when he Udbodhan was started, and finally he managed to construct a house for the Holy Mother in Kolkata, which is known as Mayarbadi, or the Mother's House, which is also known as Udbodhan. And he continued writing these articles serially for Udbodhan, because Udbodhan the editor of Udbodhan, in the beginning it was Swami Trigunatitanji, then there were so many others who contributed. They were searching for articles, new articles. So it was serially published from 1909 to 1919. 10 years, this small articles sequentially they were published, and later on they formed the Leela Prasang, the Guru Bhav Purvardha and Uttarardha. He later said that it was because he was not inspired from within that he did not complete the last part of the Master's life, that is the 5th volume. He did not complete. All the disciples and even the editor of Udbodhan told him, see, Swamiji, Swami Shardananji, you should not leave this incomplete. Please complete it. First he agreed and he said, let me see. But somehow the passing away uh, uh, of Holy Mother, maybe one of the reasons which he mentioned, he says, I felt as if all the power has been withdrawn from me, and he could not get that inspiration. That is why he could not complete the last part of the Master's life with details about the daily events in Kashipur and also the account of Master's death, Sri Ramakrishna's death, his Mahasamadhi. But that has been now published as Sri Ramakrishna Devar Antya Leela in Bengali by Swami Prabhananji, based on the incomplete notes which Shardanji left, and also M's incomplete notes. All those things were taken together, a lot of research was done, and the Antya Leela, or the last portion, last few months of his life, which have not been described for some strange or mysterious reason. Even in the wonderful life of Chaitanya Charitamrita, they say the last part has not been written. So they say the last part, because the incarnation, uh, people believe, especially in the Indian tradition, that these incarnations will keep coming. So there is no Antya Leela, there is no end to their Leela. The Leela which they started is, it doesn't have an end. So that's why symbolically, all the biographies which have been written about, even Chaitanya Charitamrita is not complete. The last portion is that last account of the death and the other things, they are not there. In most of the descriptions of the biographies of great people, especially the incarnations, this somehow mysteriously the last part is missing. So similarly, in Sri Ramakrishna's life also we'll find that though Sardhananji wrote the 5th volume, where he has described a lot of incidents which took place in Kashipur, but actually an account of the Master's death was not described. It is wonderful, amazing that Swami Shardananji was able to collect all this wonderful information in details of the Master's life, even though he started his writing his biography 23 years after the Master's passing away. Sri Ramakrishna passed away, as we all know, in 1886. But Swami Shardananji started writing it only in 1909. That makes it only almost 23 years after the Master's passing away. He started writing his biography. That is 23 years. So how he jotted down, and he was constantly, not that he had not started preparing, as I said, he had started collecting the information from various authentic sources. See, that is one important thing about this Leela Prasang, that it is a very, very authentic, because Swami Shardananji had that habit of verifying and cross-verifying all the incidents. So the people who met Sri Ramakrishna, including the people who knew him when he was a child, were still living in Kamarpukur, Jairam Bhatti, in Calcutta. There were so many people uh, who had been witnesses to the different aspects of his life or different phases of his life of Sri Ramakrishna right from childhood. So he took a lot of pains to record and to verify and re-verify, cross-verify from different people to see that the authenticity of the information is not compromised. So he had the he in a small notebook. In those days it was so difficult, one had to write painfully, note down all these things, all the sources of information and all the points, all the incidents that happened in a brief way used to write and then meditate on it, just as the gospel was written, all the incidents which M had a photographic memory. So M was also alive when this Leela Prasang was written. So definitely he was one of the important sources. So there were many incidents which Swami Shardanji himself did not witness, but he considered them to be authentic because they were coming from people who were themselves associated and very authentic people. Like Swami Vijnananandji, some of the incidents which he has written have come, were told to him by Swami Vijnananandji. And because he knew that Vijnananandji is right from his childhood, even without, even by mistake, would not speak an untruth. In fact, there are so many incidents, we will not go into details of all those things. He had such a passion for holding on to truth, literally holding on to truth, so that one day when Vijnananandji's parents blamed him for telling the untruth, he got terribly angry and he tore his janoi, or the sacred thread, saying that if if I have told the untruth, then I don't deserve to wear this, and saying that he tore it. So they were all very much afraid. After that, nobody tested because he hated being called as untruthful. His adherence to truth was so much. So many incidents which Swami Vijnananandji, of course, might have told Swami Shardanandji, I don't think he would have cross-verified it because he was sure of the authenticity of that incident. So Master's early, Sri Ramakrishna's early life from the villagers of Kamarpukur, whether it is accounts of Master Sadhana, which Hriday Ram, who was a witness to all those things, because the direct disciples had not come. They started coming only in the late 80s. But before that period, his sadhana was over. So Hriday was a main source. Then Sri Ramakrishna, of course, Holy Mother Sri Ma Sharda Devi was also consulted now and then, and even for cross verification, Swami Shardan used to often, because he had the advantage of Holy Mother staying in Udbodhan. When he started writing this, he could consult Holy Mother whenever he wanted regarding the authenticity of these different incidents. So there were other disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, householder disciples, who gave him eyewitness accounts. But he was very careful, and without cross verification, especially Hriday's versions, unless he cross verified, he never accepted. But certain things he had to accept. So when Swami Shardanji wrote the 5th volume of that book, this wonderful book. Of course, it is in 2 volumes, and the book which has been given to you as PDF on WhatsApp is just 1 volume. So that has been, if you see inside, the contents have been divided into 5 parts. So in the preface to his 5th volume, even that has been published. Each of the prefaces which appear in the original Bengali in each of the volumes are mentioned, are reproduced, or are translated in the main book. Even though the volume is 1, we will find it divided into 5 parts, and each volume has a preface and introduction. But the contents have been taken and placed in the beginning so that people know what is there in 1st volume, what is there in the 2nd volume, and so on and so forth. So Swami Shardanandji, when he wrote the 5th volume, he says, when we first, I'm just quoting what he wrote. He says, when we first started writing about the Master's divine play, we never imagined that we would proceed so far. Means when he started, he knew it was a Herculean task. It was a very difficult task to write a very comprehensive biography. And it was just the grace of Mother, according to him, who gave him the Shakti or the power to do to write this book. And you must remember that he was the General Secretary right from beginning, the Secretary who is the administrative head of the Ramakrishna Mission. The President was of course Swami Brahmanandji. Later on we had Swami Shivanandji, and then other were there, other direct disciples. They were the presidents, but the administrative head would be the General Secretary. So apart from solving all the other administrative problems and also running the Udbodhan, collecting funds for Udbodhan, or uh, publishing various books, Bengali books, and trying to repay the loan which he had taken to build a house for Mother. He, in that busy schedule, he managed to write these 5 volumes. So when he started, he did not think that he would be able to complete it. So he says, we never imagined. Swami Shardanji always used to write we. He will never say I, because he felt there was some strange power helping him to write these books. He never could use the word I. So wherever you will find him referring to the first person, he will say we. So he says, whenever we first started writing about the Master's divine play or Leela Prasanga, we never imagined that we would proceed so far. It was possible only by his inconceivable grace. So he knew that without Sri Ramakrishna's grace, this would not be possible. This monumental work would not have been possible. This detailed biography of Sri Ramakrishna is unique in the spiritual literature, because we do not find such elaborate detailed accounts for either Krishna, Buddha, or even Christ. There have been gospels. From that we get some idea of their life, and because that forms the part of the Bible and the New Testament and other things. But an authentic or detailed biography of either Krishna will find mention in many scriptures, and it has been mixed with myths and other things. So we do not know exactly what happened. Even the Buddha's life, when it was written, when the teachings were compiled, it was 500 years had almost passed. So there were so many parables and myths which are centered around Buddha or even Christ or all the great prophets. But here you will find a very authentic, a faithful biography, and a very authentic and well, you can say, a well discussed. Every incident has been discussed. The facts have been placed before the reader, and some interpretation of those facts, uh, considering the background of the age in which he lived that life, because that is very important. Every incarnation's life has to be studied in the background of the situation or the atmosphere or the religious and other social atmosphere which was there at that time. That is why when we study Islam, the teachings of Islam, the teaching of Christianity, the situation or the environment of the society or the uh, conditions of society, from a historical perspective, we have to find out what was the need for that prophet or that incarnation to give that message, because it was more relevant to that age than maybe for the present time. So every incarnation, there are two types of uh, messages. One is an eternal message which does not change with time, and which does not time with change with time. And there's another kind of message which is relevant to that particular age only. So one has to know, one has to very carefully distinguish between the eternal truths, the eternal values, and the temporal things which were the need of that particular age. And that is the mastery which Swami Shardananji has shown while writing this biography. So every time he describes an incident, he tries to analyze as if a lawyer would discuss threadbare why he, what was the reason for Sri Ramakrishna to perform certain actions, to do uh, certain events where are explained in that manner, in a very analytical way, in a very comprehensive way. So in the preface to the third volume, as I said, in the preface to the third volume, where he has reproduced verbatim the small booklet Hinduism and Sri Ramakrishna, written by Swami Vivekananda, he writes something very significant. He says, the master told us explicitly, these are Swami Shardanji's words, the master told us explicitly again and again that he who was born as Rama and as Krishna in previous ages is now in this sheath, in this body. And then he says, the spiritual experiences of this place, meaning himself, Sri Ramakrishna pointing to himself, have surpassed even the Vedas and the Vedanta. So these are the two lines which Swami Shardananji himself heard. And that is the reason why he says that it's not just Swami Vivekananda who heard, to whom he said that he was born as Rama and who was born as Krishna has been born as Sri Ramakrishna, not in the Vedantic sense, but he has repeatedly said. So that means he has explained that or impressed upon the minds of his intimate disciples, especially disciples like Shardanji, the direct disciples, the purpose of this incarnation and the spiritual experiences which he experienced, they far have surpassed, because Vedas and Vedanta, they are experiences of certain rishis in a particular time. So there is no end. The book of spirituality, as Swamiji declared in America, is not a closed book. The book of God is never a closed book. It's always an open book. Every incarnation comes and write a few leaves, and that forms part of the book. So it is a never ending book, eternal book, and it will continue. That is the attitude with which Swami Shardananji and Sri Ramakrishna and of course Swamiji approached his life and message. So he says, so that's why we find that he is trying to recount as impartially as possible. When he narrates the incident, he is impartial. You can see that Shardananji gives a very impartial account of Sri Ramakrishna's life. Not because he was his guru or he considered him to be an incarnation. He did not want the reader to feel pressurized to accept certain things. He logically analyzed and placed it before the readers, and he says, this is what I have understood of it. This is what we saw. Now you accept whatever you want. That is why he wanted to impartially express what Sri Ramakrishna said and what he himself experienced. And he said he was established in this Bhavamukha. First he explains what is Bhavamukha. We will come to that chapter in the third volume, where without understanding that, according to Shardananji, we will not understand who Thakur is. So he says, Sri Ramakrishna was established in Bhavamukha. When we see him in that state, when we try to imagine or try to understand what that state really means and how difficult it is to attain, then we are forced to admit, Swami Shardanji writes, we are forced to admit that such an extraordinary life had never before been seen in the spiritual world. And he is comparing him with all the previous spiritual giants. You should remember that. It's not because he was Swami Shardananji's guru. It's not because of that. But he says so that's why he says, I humbly ask the reader to approach this book with an open mind. So he says Sri Ramakrishna experimented with and verified truth or God or reality, whatever name we give it, like a scientist. He never taught anything that he had not experienced himself. So this makes it very, very authentic, that it is a record, it is a compilation, or it is an interpretation of a life where everything was experienced and then only spoken. It's not an intellectual understanding of certain things. That is definitely a much lower approach, where we try to intellectually understand things and explain it to people without having experienced it ourselves. So that doesn't give authenticity. So the authenticity of their words are there. Authenticity is because of the experience which is backing the words that they uttered. At the back of behind the words that Sri Ramakrishna uttered, Swami Shardanji says, they have experimented and verified truth. So when Naren came and asked him, have you seen God? He did not want to listen to any philosophy, because he had learnt and read in his college days or even before a lot of things about philosophy, Western philosophy, Eastern philosophy, Brahmo philosophy. So he says, I had enough of these things. These are all empty words for me. It's just intellectual jugglery. I don't want to involve. So I want a straight question. He asked Sri Ramakrishna, have you experienced or seen God? Seen God means, have you experienced? So Shardanji says, since he never taught anything that he had not experienced himself, it makes this book special. It makes a record of the life and experiences of Sri Ramakrishna, the life and incidents of his life, a very, very authentic spiritual guide for modern man. Later, when we see when Swami Vivekananda asked the master, I mean, when after all the realizations he had, he said, Sir, have you seen God? He replied without a moment's hesitation, yes, I have seen God. I see him as I see you here, only more clearly. God can be seen, one can talk to him. Thus, Sri Ramakrishna met the challenges which were raised by many educated, English educated, university educated disciples, and dispelled their doubts by authentic declaration based on his own experience. So even agnostics and atheists came to him. It's not that only Brahmins and followers of other sects who had some faith in their own philosophy came to him. There were a lot of agnostics, there were atheists also who came, and one of them was, of course, the famous Dr. Mahendralal Sarkar, who was a scientist at heart, in mind and even in heart. He believed, and he in fact started the Indian Association for Cultivation of Sciences. He felt that religion, though he used to appreciate the Brahmo approach to religion, but he was an atheist himself, and he believed in the power and the benefits of science, especially the medical science in which he had proficiency. He believed that science can solve a large number of problems. So he was an atheist, and he came, but still he was attracted by the life, wonderful life and message of Sri Ramakrishna, mainly because he somehow had an intuitive feeling that this person or this Sri Ramakrishna is not one who is just quoting certain things from books. He's speaking something from his own life experience, from the sadhana or the experience he had as a result of a lot of sadhana or a lot of spiritual practice. So they were also dumbfounded when they saw Master in Samadhi. So he used to use his medical knowledge to just to see how can the heart stop, how can the breathing stop, how can all the functions of prana come to a stop except a little heat in the body on the top of the head. Everything was as if Sri Ramakrishna was a corpse. So they could not deny when they see these wonderful phenomenon. When they saw this wonderful phenomena, the agnostics and the atheists Even a doctor like who was a very prominent doctor in those days, Dr. Mahendra Lal Sarkar, who was an allopath who was later on practicing homeopathy and treating Sri Ramakrishna, he saw, when he was shocked when he first saw the state of Samadhi, it went and examined the whole body and he found no signs of life. So they were dumbfounded when they saw the master in Samadhi. He never said, but at the same time, he never said anything that was contrary to reason. Reason was used, and he used to use logic. Sometimes he used to tell Master Mashe to explain him what they teach you in logic in the university. Though himself was unlettered, he still knew many things because he had heard a lot of things. And he always encouraged his disciples to accept him, to test his words and experiment with it before accepting them. One famous incident is that when he said, I cannot touch a coin, it was a nervous association of certain ideas which Sri Ramakrishna uh, personified. So when he said he cannot touch money, he could not touch it. Even secretly, when Swami Vivekananda put a coin under his cot, under his mattress on the cot, he just jumped as if a scorpion had stung him. Something was below. And Naren was ashamed because but Sri Ramakrishna was very pleased with him. He said, no, you should test. You don't accept anything. So he always encouraged everybody, his disciples, to test his words before accepting him. So that is why you will find in Swami Sharadanandaji's approach to the great master, how beautifully he is analyzing, testing it, and trying all counter arguments to solve, to address the doubts of people who are skeptical, who are atheists, who are agnostics. So somehow he, as if he is speaking on their behalf, as a lawyer is arguing and counter arguing, and he will come to a conclusion based on the experiences Sri Ramakrishna demonstrated. So then finally his life, if we see, according to Swami Sharadananda, is a glowing beacon in an age when we are trying to recover our bearings in the turbulent sea of opinions. We have so much of opinion around us. Now with the modern social media, opinions keep on changing. We just, there is a maze of information which is being bombarded upon us. That is the need for the study of this book. It's not just for devotees or some spiritual practitioners that his life is necessary. In this mad world where a sea of opinions, different opinions about what is the value of life, what is the values that we should have in life, what is the utility of different things, the materialism, running after so many things, and also different concepts about religion, which is causing enough quarrels, enough uh, turmoil in the whole world, as if the economic and socio-economic problems are creating enough problems of living. And then if you add to it the turmoil that is created by a narrow and dogmatic approach to religion, you can imagine what this age when Sri Ramakrishna incarnated. Swamiji says he came at a junction of history when confusion, which was already there because of religion, to that there was a further attack by atheism, or maybe a scientific atheism, which tried to prove that everything divine or everything religious or everything spiritual is wrong because it cannot be verified with senses. It was a very, very materialistic approach, that a thing that you cannot perceive through your senses cannot be true. So it was a very illogical, though they call it a scientific approach, it is not a true scientific approach. If one has to approach scientifically, then one has to be a spiritual scientist as Sri Ramakrishna was. He can be called, he can be termed as a spiritual scientist. So we are running out of time now. If there are some questions, I can just take it. Otherwise, we'll conclude for today. It is almost half an hour more. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna I think we don't
Namaste,
have
Swamiji.
time for questions. Anyway, if you are not tired, then you can ask. I have already taken more time, about 20 minutes more. I did not realize that it is 8:30 now. So if there are some questions, you can ask. Otherwise, in the chat you can ask. Otherwise, I'll take your leave and we will perhaps meet on next Thursday. Hmm? And I'll stick to time because today it was the introductory talk. I felt that I should give a comprehensive idea about what this great master is all about and why it is so important to read this book, especially for those who consider Sri Ramakrishna to be the ideal they should be following in their personal life of sadhana. So unless we know, it's not enough to just meditate, take his name and visualize his form, because that is part of what we should be doing. But the main part is to understand in depth and internalize the ideas and the meditation on the different leelas or the divine play of Sri Ramakrishna. So I'll take your leave. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.
Namaste, Swamiji.
Namaste.
Namaste.